Soccer's world governing body is sending a strong message to President Trump about the 2026 World Cup games. The vice president of FIFA reacted to the president's claim that he can move matches out of U.S. cities that he considers dangerous.
Spotlights fade in on a packed newsroom wall where the words "FIFA rebukes White House" crawl across the ticker. In Washington, D.C., a confident podium line from President Donald Trump lands like a thunderclap. If any U.S. host city for World Cup 2026 is unsafe, games will be moved. Minutes later, in Zurich, a measured voice from FIFA answers with steel under velvet. Football is bigger than any government. Between those two sentences, a continent-wide celebration begins to feel like a negotiation. And while America argues with itself, Canada and Mexico quietly start looking like the adults in the room, calm, prepared, and ready to absorb the spotlight. This isn't just a stadium saga. It's a stress test of soft power, tourism economics, and global trust. The World Cup is a trillion-watt advertising campaign for whoever hosts it. Full hotels, packed restaurants, broadcast rights, new transit links, and a once-in-a-generation chance to rebrand a nation. If FIFA's confidence in U.S. logistics, security, and visas wobbles, the ripple isn't just about soccer. It's about jobs, city budgets, sponsors, and the message the United States sends to millions of first-time visitors. Meanwhile, Vancouver, Toronto, Mexico City, and Monterrey are rehearsing with precision. Venue upgrades locked, transport plans mapped, security protocols unified. Order versus uncertainty. Reliability versus rhetoric. Which one does a global tournament choose? Here's the promise for the next 25-30 minutes. We'll unpack how a single press room line turned into a boardroom problem. How FIFA's governance, broadcast contracts, and insurance clauses create real limits on political theater. Why Canada and Mexico can gain market share in tourism and sponsorship value without saying a word. And how this showdown could rewire where the marquee matches, the media center, and the money actually flow. The question isn't, can one president move matches? It's, whose credibility moves a global economy? Because when the world arrives with tickets and cameras, it follows the path of least risk. And that path may be bending away from U.S. cities toward neighbors who look, to sponsors and families, safer and simpler. To understand how the World Cup 2026 turned into a geopolitical power test, we need to rewind to the moment of unity that started it all. In 2018, FIFA made history by awarding the first tri-nation World Cup to the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It was supposed to be a celebration of North American cooperation, a symbolic partnership that blended American infrastructure, Canadian organization, and Mexican passion. Back then, even Donald Trump publicly supported the bid, signing official guarantees that all athletes and fans would be welcomed, regardless of nationality or faith. It was a gesture meant to reassure the world that the U.S. could still be the stage for global harmony. Fast forward 7 years, that harmony is cracking. When Trump returned to power, his tone toward international institutions shifted once again. His latest statement, threatening to move matches away from cities he deems unsafe, wasn't just campaign bravado. It struck at the very heart of FIFA's authority. Inside FIFA's Zurich headquarters, officials immediately recognized the risk. The World Cup is not just a game. It's a complex web of contracts, insurance, and broadcasting rights negotiated over a decade. Every stadium, every sponsor, every broadcast schedule has been locked for years. Changing even one venue would require hundreds of legal renegotiations and billions in compensation. And there's a deeper reason for FIFA's swift rebuttal: precedent. If one government could override the organization's logistics for political reasons, it would set a dangerous global example. So, within hours of Trump's declaration, FIFA Vice President Victor Montagliani, himself a Canadian, delivered a calm but unmistakable warning. Football is bigger than any nation, any government, any slogan. It was more than a quote. It was a line in the sand. Behind the scenes, Canada and Mexico sensed opportunity. Their preparations were running ahead of schedule. Vancouver and Toronto had completed transit and security upgrades months early. Mexico City and Monterrey had already launched their tourism campaigns. Meanwhile, reports from U.S. venues like Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Chicago told a different story: protests, safety concerns, and visa bottlenecks. In private meetings, FIFA executives began revisiting contingency plans drafted years ago, backup host arrangements that could quietly shift more matches north or south if U.S. conditions deteriorated. Officially, nothing changed. But unofficially, confidence did. Because in global sports, just like in economics, confidence is currency. And once it starts leaking, it rarely returns in full. When President Trump's "unsafe cities" comment echoed through Washington, the aftershock didn't stay in politics. It rippled across the global sports economy. Within 24 hours, the story jumped from ESPN and BBC to Bloomberg and Reuters, where analysts weren't debating tactics on the field but liability, insurance, and reputation risk. Inside FIFA headquarters in Zurich, the tone shifted from irritation to calculation. Every major broadcaster, from Fox Sports to Sky, has clauses in their contracts tied to venue stability. If one host nation becomes unpredictable, sponsors and advertisers have the right to renegotiate rates. Trump's statement, therefore, wasn't just political noise. It was a potential multi-billion-dollar market disruption. Global investors started paying attention. Shares of companies connected to the tournament, travel agencies, hospitality groups, and ticketing platforms dipped slightly. Nothing catastrophic, but it sent a clear message. When the world's biggest sporting event trembles, markets listen. Then came the quiet maneuvering. In Zurich, top FIFA executives convened a closed meeting dubbed Operational Review 26. The agenda: evaluate the stability of American venues and identify potential reallocations of high-visibility matches. In Canada, tourism boards seized the moment. Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal began rebranding themselves as the world's safest stage for football. In Mexico City, preparations for the Estadio Azteca's modernization accelerated ahead of schedule, a signal to FIFA that the country was ready to carry more weight if needed. By contrast, U.S. planning meetings grew tense. City organizers from Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and Atlanta expressed frustration that politics was overshadowing years of local work. One insider, quoted by the Washington Post, described the mood as panic under pressure. And as the debate raged, the world noticed something bigger. FIFA wasn't just protecting its schedule. It was protecting its independence. The organization that has survived dictatorships, boycotts, and global crises could not afford to appear controlled by a single government. That perception carried symbolic weight far beyond sports. In Europe, newspapers began drawing parallels between Trump's remarks and the U.S.'s broader struggle to project unity abroad. In Asia, editorials praised Canada and Mexico for steady diplomacy and quiet reliability. In Latin America, analysts saw the shift as poetic, the student nations now rescuing the master host. The real shock, however, was economic. Travel forecasters predicted that even a 5% drop in international visitors to the U.S. leg of the tournament could cost $1.2 billion in lost tourism revenue. Meanwhile, Canadian and Mexican projections went up by the same margin. The 2026 World Cup was meant to showcase a unified North America. Instead, it was becoming a competition within the coalition, a race not for goals, but for credibility. By the end of the week, one truth had crystallized inside FIFA's boardrooms. If the world sees chaos in one host, the camera will naturally pan to the calm. And right now, those calm shots were coming from Vancouver, Toronto, and Mexico City. For the United States, the 2026 World Cup was supposed to be a golden opportunity. A $10 billion tourism windfall, 400,000 temporary jobs, and a rare chance to remind the world that America could still host global spectacle with unmatched scale. But within weeks of President Trump's remarks, that opportunity began slipping through the cracks of its own uncertainty. In Los Angeles, organizers reported a sharp slowdown in international ticket pre-registrations. The reason wasn't a lack of enthusiasm, it was doubt. Fans from Europe and South America told travel agencies they feared sudden venue changes or visa complications. In Philadelphia, hotels that had spent millions on renovations for World Cup guests began quietly adjusting projections downward. One hotel chain executive told Bloomberg, "The risk premium of being an American host city just went up." The economic blow was subtle but unmistakable. Each host city had invested heavily in upgrades. Atlanta's Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Seattle's Lumen Field, Miami's transit expansion, all financed on the assumption of full international attendance. When Trump implied certain cities might be unsafe, he unknowingly devalued those investments overnight. Municipal bond analysts began labeling World Cup-linked infrastructure debt as politically exposed. At the federal level, the fallout landed in the most sensitive arena of all: tourism confidence. The U.S. Travel Association projected that if only 1 in 10 fans decided to skip the American venues, it could erase $1.8 billion in direct spending. Airfares and hotel packages tied to the tournament began to fluctuate. Even airlines like Delta and United, which had expected a summer surge, quietly trimmed forecasts. Meanwhile, FIFA's clarification that the president held no authority to relocate matches drew global attention to America's internal confusion. Sports economists on CNBC called it a governance embarrassment. The perception that politics could disrupt logistics made corporate sponsors nervous. Insurance companies revisited risk premiums for U.S. stadium coverage. Beyond the numbers, there was something intangible at stake: prestige. Hosting the World Cup is about image, about telling the world, we are open, safe, and capable. Yet, the United States suddenly looked divided, unpredictable, and preoccupied with its own rhetoric. The same nation that once guaranteed universal access to fans and players was now debating which of its own cities were too dangerous to welcome them. Across the northern border, Canada was quietly cashing in. The World Tourism Council estimated that Vancouver and Toronto could see an additional $400 million in spillover revenue as fans chose safer, simpler entry points. Travel influencers dubbed it the peace of mind route. Even Mexico City benefited with rising hotel bookings and sponsorship interest from Latin American brands. Inside Washington, officials tried to regain control of the narrative. The Commerce Department launched an emergency campaign, "See You in the U.S.," promising smooth travel and world-class hospitality. But it felt defensive, even desperate. The damage was done. The truth was brutal. For every month of political turbulence, the economic value of hosting the World Cup on U.S. soil shrank. And as confidence leaked away, FIFA's cameras, and corporate dollars began pivoting toward calmer ground. Because in global business, uncertainty is the most expensive currency of all. Every global event creates economic winners and political losers. But when politics collides with sports, those lines sharpen fast. The 2026 World Cup was meant to be a shared triumph of North American cooperation. Instead, it's quietly turning into a redistribution of influence, money, and trust. Winners. 1. Canada. The quiet power. If the U.S. projected noise and uncertainty, Canada projected calm and competence. While Washington made headlines, Vancouver and Toronto moved silently, completing infrastructure upgrades ahead of schedule. Public transportation networks expanded, visa processes were streamlined, and tourism boards launched multilingual campaigns to present Canada as the safe, open, and inclusive face of the World Cup. The payoff was immediate. Hotel bookings in Vancouver jumped 18%, Sponsorship interest rose, and major brands like Adidas and Visa requested that key marketing shoots be relocated to Canadian venues. Behind the scenes, FIFA began quietly describing Canada as the operational backbone of the 2026 tournament. 2. Mexico, the cultural anchor. In Mexico City and Monterrey, the World Cup preparations became a point of national pride. Mexico leaned on its proven hosting record and cultural magnetism, offering what the U.S. could not: enthusiasm without controversy. Local industries flourished: construction, hospitality, broadcast production, and sponsors recognized the potential of Mexico's massive regional audience. For every match potentially shifted away from the U.S., Mexico's role grew. In marketing terms, it wasn't an adjustment, it was an expansion. 3. FIFA, the guardian of independence. Though briefly rattled, FIFA's leadership ultimately emerged stronger. By publicly reaffirming that football is bigger than any nation, it reminded the world that sports governance remains autonomous from political interference. The crisis became a showcase of its institutional resilience. Investors and broadcasters saw that no matter the politics, the tournament would continue, and continue profitably. Losers. 1. U.S. host cities and local economies. Cities like Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Chicago spent millions upgrading transport systems, security networks, and stadium facilities, all now shadowed by uncertainty. If marquee matches or fan zones shift away, those sunk costs turn into losses. Analysts estimate that every match moved north or south of the border could drain $90 to $120 million from local economies. 2. American tourism and brand image. The United States has long been the world's marketing capital, the place where global events meet global audiences. But this controversy dented that image. The visa hurdles, the rhetoric about safety, and the perception of instability combined to make America look like a host in doubt. International fans and sponsors alike began associating America 2026 with complication instead of celebration. 3. The American presidency itself, Trump's political show of strength, backfired into a demonstration of limitation. By trying to assert control over a global event, he inadvertently revealed the boundaries of presidential power, and in the process, weakened the very authority he sought to display. His statement became a case study in how political theater can undermine economic strategy. 4. U.S. corporations and advertisers. Major sponsors like Coca-Cola, Nike, and Visa rely on global goodwill. When politics polarized the event, they were forced into silence, unwilling to appear partisan. Their branding space, once guaranteed on American soil, started migrating toward Canadian and Mexican broadcasts, where ad rates were rising along with fan engagement. The scoreboard now tells a simple story. Canada and Mexico gained trust. FIFA regained control. The U.S. lost its monopoly on the spotlight. And in an industry where perception is profit, credibility is the currency that counts. The United States entered the tournament as the dominant host. It may leave as merely one of 3. Because in the global economy of sports, the crowd always follows confidence, not controversy. The 2026 World Cup is still a year away, but its trajectory now mirrors something much larger than sports. It's a reflection of North America's shifting balance of power. What began as a unified event could evolve into 3 vastly different outcomes, each carrying its own economic, political, and reputational consequences. Best case: North America reunites on the global stage. In the most optimistic scenario, diplomacy and pragmatism prevail. The White House quietly steps back from the controversy, allowing the U.S. Soccer Federation and FIFA to repair relations and reaffirm existing commitments. City organizers coordinate with Homeland Security to guarantee safety without the political noise. A joint press conference from Trump, Carney, and Mexico's president, rare but not impossible, could reframe the tournament as a story of resilience and unity. In this path, confidence returns. Sponsors reinvest, fan demand rebounds, and the narrative shifts from chaos to comeback. The 2026 World Cup becomes a reminder that even in polarized times, North America can still lead when it stands together. Base case: the quiet rebalance. More realistically, FIFA adjusts without admitting it. Behind closed doors, the organization expands Canada's and Mexico's hosting roles, perhaps one additional quarterfinal, expanded fan zones, or centralizing the international media hub in Toronto rather than New York. Officially, nothing changes. But when viewers tune in, they'll notice more cameras north and south, fewer iconic shots of American cities. This scenario keeps the tournament intact while signaling a subtle shift in global trust. Canada and Mexico emerge as model hosts for a new era of balanced multi-country events, while the U.S. remains a vital but reduced player, still rich in infrastructure, but poorer in credibility. Worst case, the spotlight shifts away entirely. In the darkest version of events, the tension escalates. Another political controversy, a safety incident, a protest crackdown, or a high-profile visa dispute forces FIFA's hand. Key matches are quietly reassigned, and international broadcasters relocate their operations to Vancouver or Mexico City, effectively moving the heart of the World Cup outside U.S. borders. The economic impact would be massive. Billions in lost tourism, stranded local contracts, and a once-in-a-generation branding failure for the United States. For Canada and Mexico, however, it would mark a new era, stepping into the role of trusted hosts for global events. Signals to watch, venue schedule updates, any technical rescheduling that moves knockout games to Canada or Mexico. Corporate partnerships. If major sponsors begin centering campaigns around non-US venues. FIFA media operations. The relocation of its main broadcast hub could reveal where true confidence lies. Tourism data. Early ticket and visa patterns will show which cities fans trust most. Public messaging from Trump or FIFA. Whether tone shifts toward cooperation or confrontation. The likely outcome: a divided triumph. The most probable scenario sits between optimism and fracture. The tournament will go on as planned, but the symbolic winner won't be the loudest nation, it'll be the most stable one. America will still host the majority of matches, yet Canada and Mexico will walk away with something far more valuable: global goodwill. And when the closing ceremony lights fade, that goodwill will echo in tourism, investment, and diplomatic capital long after the final whistle. Because in the 21st century, power doesn't just belong to the biggest stage, it belongs to the one the world still trusts to keep the lights on. The story of the 2026 World Cup has already outgrown sports. It's become a mirror, reflecting the deeper question of who the world trusts to lead in an era where politics, image, and economics collide. When the United States, Canada, and Mexico won the bid back in 2018, the promise was unity, a showcase of continental cooperation at a time when globalization itself was under strain. But 7 years later, that vision stands fractured. The U.S., once seen as the reliable anchor of international events, now finds itself questioned, not for its infrastructure or wealth, but for its stability. Canada and Mexico, long considered junior partners, have proven that credibility is the new currency in global leadership. 3 lessons now define this moment. First, reputation has become a form of capital. It's not enough to build stadiums or sign contracts. The world invests in confidence, not construction. A single statement can shift billions in tourism, sponsorships, and brand value. The U.S. didn't lose control of the World Cup through logistics. It lost it through perception. Second, quiet strength is often the most powerful kind. While Washington spoke loudly, Vancouver, Toronto, and Mexico City simply executed. No rhetoric, no theatrics, just results. And in a world addicted to drama, reliability feels revolutionary. Their reward isn't just more matches, it's global admiration. Third, leadership in the modern world is not about dominance but about consistency. FIFA's calm defiance reminded governments everywhere that authority isn't owned by the loudest voice, but by the one that endures. The organization walked a diplomatic tightrope, defending its independence while keeping the show alive, and in doing so, reasserted that sports remain one of the few arenas where rules still matter more than politics. In the end, this isn't just about football. It's about soft power and the price nations pay when it fades. The World Cup is the world's stage, and right now it's rewarding those who plan, not those who posture. Because whether in diplomacy, trade, or sport, credibility is the last true superpower left. And as 2026 draws near, the spotlight may shine brightest not on Washington, but on the quieter capitals, the ones that kept their word, kept their promise, and kept the world watching.